lot of experience. Our next guest, joining us now, Republican Congressman Dan Donovan of our great state of New York, who serves on the Foreign Affairs and the Homeland Security Committee.
So why did you ruin our relationship with Russia?
We just had to. I thought the relationship between the president and Russia was good.
Right. So you guys had to step in. Because he tweeted this morning, for those of you who didn't see it, Donald Trump tweeted this morning, our relationship with Russia is at an all-time and very dangerous low. You can thank Congress, the same people that can't even give us health care.
In all sincerity, I mean, what do you do with this if you're you?
Well, you know, listen, there's a reason why we have a separation of branches of government. And the Congress has to do their job, the president has to do his job, our judiciary does their job. Sometimes they work together, sometimes they don't. I was one of the 20 Republicans who voted against the replacement plan that was put forth to replace the Affordable Care Act. I didn't think it was good for the New Yorkers. I didn't think it was good for the people who are watching your show. It was going to cost a lot of taxes for hard-working people. It was going to crush the ability for seniors to buy insurance at a time in their lives where they probably need health care insurance more than they did in their younger years, and many live on limited incomes. So, you know, I've known the president for 20 years as a New Yorker. I was the district attorney of Staten Island for 12 years before I went to Congress. He's been a good supporter, a good friend, and I think he's doing many good things that he probably doesn't get the credit for because a lot of things overshadow some of the good work that's happening down in Washington.
But many of the things that overshadow it are by his own hand.
That's true. You're absolutely right.
So are you working with this group of 43 or something, what do we call them? Problem solvers.
Problem solvers
in Congress.
The Tuesday group.
Who are coming together to try and do what we can do to stabilize the individual insurance markets and come up with something that might provide a shell of health care reform?
Well, the reason we have to do that, and I did an op-ed about how do we kick off health care reform. You know, the Affordable Care Act, one of the criticisms, it was passed without one Republican vote. We just passed a replacement plan without one Democratic vote. If we keep doing this back and forth on a partisan basis, every time that there's a new resident at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, we're going to have a new health care policy for America. It's not fair to families, it's not fair to patients, it's not fair to providers.
But in spite of Trump, are you actually going to create some bipartisanship? I think about sanctions going through. I think about health care. Maybe you're working together. The president doesn't want to see that happen, but are you actually reaching across the aisle now more than you were 2 years ago?
I believe, well, I've only been there for 2 years, but I believe we are. I think there's a lot of people on both sides of the aisle that just want to govern. You know, I don't want to say we make sacrifices, but people that do what I do, we're away from our families 3 out of 4 weeks at a month. I live in my office. I sleep in my office because I can't afford rent down in Washington.
You know who's not away from his family?
Who's
the president.
The president's not. He moved them down now.
He's got his 2 closest advisors, his daughter and his son-in-law.
Right.
Does that really work? When you have to answer to the people from the state of New York, they think that's a good idea?
Well, I think that the president went in there and had to have some people in the building that he trusted, that had no ambition of their own, who only wanted to be there because he asked them to. Maybe they don't participate in a lot of things, but they wanted to listen. If they're sitting in a meeting, they want to make sure that the president's interests are being followed through and not some ambitious staffer at the White House. So, you know, every president has been able to select their own staff. Some first ladies have had more of a role in government than other first ladies. So this has been the tradition of our government, so I don't see anything different. The tradition of grown children tends to be in other parts of the world more than here. But let's talk about this immigration thing. We were chatting a little about it in the break yesterday. Tom Cotton and David Perdue came out and talked about this new immigration plan modeled on the Canadian plan of merit-based immigration and a point system, which, you know, I've seen work in Canada very well. But Canada didn't choose to reduce the number of immigrants it takes in and has taken in 40,000 refugees since 2015. So while the system might be good, you're from Staten Island. Immigrants are a very, very rich part of our history in New York City and across this country.
Statue of Liberty is your next door neighbor.
That's correct. We are all immigrants, by the way. Some of us are first-generation immigrants, some of us are fifth-generation, but this country was built by immigrants. So there was a little bit of an undertone of nativism and you know, in that rollout yesterday, particularly in the press conference with Stephen Miller. Yeah, I think what's going to happen is, you see, no other senators have signed on to co-sponsor the bill other than Perdue and Cotton. This will evolve, but, you know, there's a point here about immigrants and people on student visas coming to our country, getting educated, and all that talent then leaves. Right. Why not allow those people to stay and use those talents in our own country? We train people to go back home and use those gifts that they were given and the education they've gotten here back home and many of them want to stay. We just have to make it easier.
So one of the things in this new raise plan, I want to just put this screen up if I can, some of the details of it, is that they're talking about, this is not, we've all thought about legal immigration, but we've never thought about, this is, actually that's not what I want. I want to just talk about this full screen that tells us about slashing legal immigration by 400,000 in the first year. It shifts from family-based systems to merit-based systems. Some people say that's okay. It prioritizes education, job skills, and English speaking, which seems to be a bit of a red meat thing. It limits family members who can seek green cards for spouses, to limiting to spouses and minor children, and it limits refugees offered permanent residency to 50,000 a year. So it's mixing up some interesting parts of a really good immigration system with some kind of gross things.
Yeah, and those things may get weeded out when this is debated. We haven't had a debate on this yet. And one of the problems that a lot of criticisms that you'll see that happens, what happens in Congress, is that things go through without debate, without a public, without a public
that was a lot of the problem with the health care bill.
Right.
What are the jobs that Americans want that they can't have here because they're being filled by immigrants? I can't get the answer to this.
Yeah, I'm not sure what those are either. But I do know that we're educating some very talented people who grew up in a foreign land and then sending them back to that foreign land.
That's not what President Trump is talking about.
When
President Trump gets on the podium, he says, these immigrants are taking jobs from you. What industries?
You know what? We may have to ask Congressman Donovan to come back from this, because I just looked at the clock, and it's getting perilously close to the Andrea Mitchell hour, which we love.
Congressman, this is your homework assignment. Please come back to us and let us know what specific industry jobs been stolen from Americans and given to immigrants. I'd love to know the answer.
I'll come to visit with you anytime.
Nice to have you here, sir. Thank you very much. Dan Donovan is a Republican congressman.